Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. I am here in front of Starbucks in Pennington, New Jersey. It is on strike, the workers, since yesterday with their Dunkin' Donuts to send a message to their employee. I'm here with a couple of the workers. Let's just go round robin and give your names.
I'm Haley. I'm a barista.
Megan, I'm also a barista.
I'm Carissa. I'm a shift leader.
I'm Sarah. I'm a shift supervisor.
I'm Gina. I'm a barista.
I'm Melissa, and I'm a shift supervisor.
So we obviously know Starbucks has been unionizing, this store unionized, and a lot of the Starbucks have been going on strike because Starbucks' response to the unionization seems to be more union busting. So tell me about what made you guys decide to go on strike and what has been the response from your managers and corporate.
I mean, as a whole, we're just fed up with the union busting. It's becoming too much, and we need to take direct action. The biggest thing happened where Starbucks released a benefits package across the country, and they're not offering it to unionized stores. And they're trying to say, oh, it's because of the unions. We can't do it. We're not allowed to. We would do it if we could. That's not the case. I would also further about our bargaining.
At our specific store, it's really been a problem with getting the stores properly scheduled. We've been closing nonstop. The customers are fed up with it. We're fed up with it. We just want to work our hours so we can pay our bills.
And why has the scheduling been so inconsistent and all that?
I can speak to that. So we have, honestly, a pretty ridiculous turnover rate, I think especially for the type of work that we do. And a lot of the ways that Starbucks sells themselves is a really great company to work for. They think that people are in there for the long haul. But because our turnover rate is so crazy, we can't train people fast enough, for how fast we're losing them. And so what ends up happening is we're throwing people in before they're really ready. So they can't carry the store the way that management wants them to, which is completely understaffed because they understaff to meet their sales goals. And the other side of that is if somebody calls out, because we are so severely understaffed on purpose, we have to close the store because there's nobody to work. And what really sucks about it is that the people who wanted to be there, who wanted to work, they can't. They lose their hours, and then they also lose the benefits that are tied to those hours. The way that Starbucks does their benefits is you have to work 20 hours a week at least to qualify. And so say you work 20 hours, somebody calls out for the night and they have to close and you were the other person working, you lose 8 hours, you get denied your benefits. It's another way for them to try to force people out because they can't afford to keep losing their hours.
So it's basically a domino effect. If things are so chaotic, if they're not staffing properly, then even the part-time workers, you don't get your benefits, which Starbucks, as far as I know, when I was unemployed, it was appealing to me because you could get health care for, not full-time hours.
Yeah, so in reality, it really seems like they would rather run their stores into the ground and run their partners into the ground rather than bargain with the union and give us the things that we need and the things that we're asking for and the things that they promised to give us and are now trying to take away.
And can you kind of talk about, since your store unionized, obviously the union busting was going on to stop you from unionizing, but how has it been after? Was there any recognition, we want to work with you, come to the table, or they just kind of stepped on the gas and further union busting?
Yeah, they really did step on the gas and they doubled down. Their end goal is most definitely to make all of the very vocally pro-union people so run down that they quit. However, that's why we're here on strike. We're not going to allow ourselves to be mistreated that way. We're not going to allow ourselves to be forced out of our jobs. We're unionizing because we care about our jobs. We care about the people we work with, and we want it to be a good job for everybody. And they would really, truly rather have no employees, no staff, run us all to the ground in hopes that everybody will just forget about the whole union thing ever happening.
And either you or somebody, you mentioned that they basically say they can't do certain things because you're unionized. Sounds like kind of a bullshit excuse to me, but can you describe what they're saying in terms of what they can and can't do? Because my understanding, I've covered the Amazon workers in Staten Island, is they're basically saying, well, once you unionize, we can't just directly give you a pay increase or better benefits. We have to go through the union.
So they can give us those benefits. Their excuse is that it would be illegal without bargaining over those benefits, but we sent a statement to them when we asked to bargain for our entire contract, telling them that we waived our rights to bargain over the new benefits. So they can completely legally give us those benefits. They're choosing not to and saying that they can't, which is a blatant lie.
Isn't this supposed to be a progressive company? I'm a little, I'm not surprised, but, that's their reputation. What's been the response from customers? Because, when I was in Buffalo covering their organizing effort, they're very kind of close with customers, things like that. People. Do they support the unionization effort? Do they have thoughts on what Starbucks is doing?
Our regulars love their baristas, and they, for the most part, want to support whatever we're doing. If we say we want to unionize, they're like, well, she makes my coffee right, so they deserve a union. They're super supportive. We even have ones that we have told them how abysmal management has been and how awful this company treats us, and they are super supportive of us no matter what. We had so many regulars come pull up like they were going to go get their coffee, and then they're like, oh wait, you're not? Oh, I'm happy for you guys. Can't get my coffee, but I'm happy. And they were celebrating with us. We even had regulars come onto the picket line with us.
What's your specific demands with this strike? I assume the schedule, other things. What are some of the demands?
Those benefits, that benefit package that they told us that they can't give us, we're demanding that.
And what's in the benefits package?
So it's raises, it's better training, what else is in there? Sorry? More sick time, things like that. There's a lot of different things.
Talk about, you were saying that they basically understaff to keep their sales goals. Starbucks, I think, had record profits during the pandemic. So essentially, they're trying to squeeze as much juice out of the orange with, less is more, or doing more with less. Can you kind of talk about the understaffing and what that's been like?
I can definitely talk about that. So specifically management gets bonuses when they don't go over the amount of labor that they've been allotted. So what that means is that even going above and beyond, like staffing to the quota, is they'll staff under. So that way there's all that extra labor they didn't use. It looks like we're doing so fantastic, we're doing so much efficient work, when in reality we're struggling and we're drowning because we don't have the help that we need, while management gets a bonus for all of the work that we're doing. The other part about it that's so frustrating is that Starbucks consistently runs in the black. They're never in the red. And so the fact that they won't take the time to make the investments into labor so that they can increase their profits by having efficient stores fully staffed, they would rather squeeze as much as they can from what has already been squeezed dry.
And honestly, most people don't think about it, but when I go into a Starbucks, it looks pretty complicated what you guys are doing. You're not just pouring black coffee. There's all these different contraptions and all this stuff. And when you have high demand, because Starbucks is usually packed, if you're understaffed, that's exhausting. You called it a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. We're all exhausted. Some of us get here at 4:30 in the morning. We're up at 4 a.m. to make this coffee. And, to not be treated like what we're doing is not only difficult, but it's important. When it's not done right, it can ruin people's day. And they do genuinely get upset. They get upset when they get up to go get their coffee and the store's closed. I get it. This was the one place I thought I'd never work because there's so much pressure. You're here to make or break people's days. I know that. A sticker on a cup can make somebody's day. That's what we're doing. So having the store closed to show people we are the ones at the end of the day who are making the business. It's not the people getting their money back in terms of buybacks and all of that stuff. It's the people here brewing the coffee, serving the customers. So that's why we're on strike today.
Let's talk about that. Right now, you have a lot of politicians, Biden, talking about that the economy's coming back. The job numbers were great. I just took a reporting trip through a couple states. Most people are living in an economic Hunger Games. You said this is screwing up you paying your bills. You're all relatively young. Can you kind of talk about, I think the thought about Starbucks is you get paid good and, good benefits, but a lot of Starbucks workers, I bet, either work another job or are living paycheck to paycheck. Describe kind of your situation as much as you want to talk about Are you struggling? Obviously, inflation, those kind of things.
I've always hated the term like, oh, the economy's going so well, because more times than not, it means millionaires and billionaires are making record profits. It never means I can comfortably pay my bills. I've always had to work hard and make maybe just above minimum wage at best. And I know all of us are working harder than Howard Schultz is. He's not getting up at 4:30 in the morning and running around a store making sure everyone can get their coffee when we make thousands of dollars a day for the store every single day.
You didn't see his speech that corporations are under attack by you?
Oh no, they're under attack. Poor them. Oh, he must be so hurt right now. Poor Howie. It's just, we're always going to have to work hard no matter how good the economy is. And I want to see a good economy where I don't have to struggle to pay my bills, where I can work a proper amount of hours, do a proper amount of work, not feel absolutely drained by the time I get home. I've worked up to 70 hours a week. At one point, I had 3 jobs and was going to school. And this job with making less than 40 hours still drains me more than that. We are so overworked here, and this is coming from someone who's done physically demanding jobs. This is so much because it's such a fast rate of work. And if we're not working fast enough and sales aren't going quickly enough, you have customers yelling at you while you're doing your job, and you're trying to get a caramel macchiato out as quick as possible, and it's still not quick enough for the customers or for Starbucks, and it gets really frustrating. I just don't want to feel that frustrated and drained anymore.
And those customers don't realize that they're not staffing you properly. And by the way, listen, I'm more of a Dunkin' guy, but like they're charging $6.50 for like a venti, frappa, whatever. So obviously they've got the money to hire more people. So it's just greed. And Howard Schultz, if you don't know Howard Schultz, who ran for president for 5 minutes, disaster. Howard Schultz did, after the Buffalo workers unionized, he had them to a conference and made this really cringe, offensive Holocaust comparison, basically telling the Buffalo workers that just unionized at Starbucks that, at the camps, they shared blankets. So we as a team, I don't know if you know about this, should kind of, you got to share, and we're partners and this and that. I don't know, it doesn't sound like they're treating you much like partners.
I do remember at one point him saying, I'm not anti-union, I'm just pro-Starbucks. And someone said, that sounds exactly like someone saying, I'm not anti-Rebel Alliance, I'm just pro-Death Star. That's exactly what it sounds like. It's funny because as well as he's doing the whole union busting thing, he's also been the best organizer, because none of us are taking what he says seriously. And it's just more fuel to the fire and more reason for us to strike and take direct action.
Tell me about yourself, because you mentioned paying your bills too. How have you been struggling? Obviously inflation, the pandemic has really, besides the health, hurt people in the wallets too.
So I am very lucky. I do have supportive parents right now. I'm only 21 years old. I'm still in school. Granted, this was the job I thought I could get independent on. I was very wrong, because I anticipated this summer to basically make enough money to get me through school. She won't schedule me enough hours, so I can fill my gas tank, I can get groceries, and then I have to wait for my next paycheck. And then I can't pay my own rent. Even if my parents weren't helping me, there was absolutely no way I could pay my rent, even if I did not have to eat. And this was the month where I was going to give back, I was going to support myself, and there is no possible way I can do it. And that's really frustrating, because how am I going to build a life when I can't get the bare minimum? This is the years where you grow your independence, and I'm living like a child still. It's frustrating.
I think it's important because, this is South Jersey, so you're not talking about trying to get rent in Manhattan. You're trying about rent, student housing, and you can't even afford that. That's what's frustrating, because like on Friday when the jobs report came out, all these wealthy white pundits are like 520,000 jobs, things are back to pre-pandemic. They don't mention rent, they don't mention that the majority of the jobs that are being created are in hospitality, which, no disrespect to anyone who works, but these aren't like vibrant union jobs. They're, low wage. If you're lucky, you could live off of one job. So the numbers don't really tell the full story for, young people.
And, this is a whole generation that's kind of living in my boots here. We're trying to get away. We're trying to support ourselves, but we're going to be relying on our parents for much longer than is comfortable. I do work 39, 43 hours a week that I'm not scheduled because we're understaffed. I'm here all the time. I work full time like my parents do, but I will never make that much money. I will never be able to pay my own because at the end of the day, I still wait for the next schedule where it's only 16.5.
Well, I mean, I am struggling too. I'm living paycheck to paycheck because I'm 20 and I'm a student at Rutgers. So I have to struggle with, affording to go to school and all of that. And I don't have a steady amount of hours every week. I can go from 32 hours to 42 hours when I have to pick up shifts. And then the next week I'm at 20. And it's like, that is not something I can live off of. I have bills to pay. I have car insurance. I have all of that stuff. And to literally have to justify why I'm not making enough money to my parents and to everyone around me is kind of embarrassing and sad because they see me going to work. They see me working my ass off. And then it's just I can't do anything. Yeah, sorry, we're on strike. And it's just frustrating. And then also this job loves to support how there are students working here. They're like, oh yeah, we support our students, we'll give you free college, whatever. You still have to pay taxes on that, which they don't like to tell you. You still have to pay bills to get free college, which is only at Arizona State Online, and they don't offer that much, but whatever.
Their free college is Arizona State Online?
Yes. Okay. So, yeah. Then, I'm a student at Rutgers full-time while also trying to work here, which is fine. I work 4:30 to 1 most days, if she even gives me those shifts that I want, because sometimes I leave at 9:30, which doesn't even make sense. Why would I want to work a 5-hour shift when I could work an 8-hour shift? But 4:30 in the morning? 4:30 in the morning. I'm an early riser. I like to get my work out of the way. But anyway, there have been countless times where Misty, our manager, has expected me to choose this job over my school. And that is extremely unacceptable to me. But also, she has this way of manipulating you and making you feel bad no matter what. And that is, it makes me physically ill. You're supposed to, Starbucks loves to put on this face of oh my God, I'm so great. I'm such a great company. I'll do anything for our partners, which is what they call the baristas and employees. But they don't. It's just a front for our customers, basically, and for new hires. Because I came into this job thinking, wow, this is going to be so great. I'm going to meet a bunch of great people, which I did. But then I didn't get the positive experiences that I was promised from management, and it's just really sad to me.
Stressful because it sounds like you're probably taking out some type of loans or things like that for school, so you're not making enough money here, and the mental thing of all right, I'm going to graduate, but then I'm going to be indebted
for the rest of my life. So it's a cycle of just wow, I'm starting to make a little bit of money, and then, nope, just kidding. I have 20 hours this week, and I actually have to use all that money I saved up to live this week. So.
What do you say to people who'd say, well, if you're not getting enough hours here, why don't you just get a job somewhere else? It doesn't seem like they say there's there's so many job openings, there's more jobs than workers, but a lot of these jobs, kind of the similar story.
Before I found this job, it took me 4 weeks to get hired from the time I interviewed to the time I started. I was unemployed for 3 months. I submitted 54 applications. I didn't hear anything back. This labor shortage is a farce. They don't want to hire people because that would make them less money. They want to find new ways to stretch us further. It's ridiculous. They don't want to hire people. We have been desperate for new hires, and it took us months to hire new people to actually, we're still not properly staffed, but we could work with what we have if we're just properly scheduled.
Well, sorry, you can go ahead. I can come back. So I know from experience, I've actually had this conversation with my manager. She was going through job applications, and she's being very, very picky with who she hires. They may be qualified, they may have the availability, but she just doesn't think they'd be a good fit or something like that. She has gotten so many job applications for this job specifically, and she just doesn't even respond to them. And it makes no sense because we are desperate right now. We need help, and she just doesn't want to do it. But then you know what? She won't pick up the hours that we need her here for, which is what a manager should do. They should be working on the floor. She does not do that. And it's so unfair. It really is. Because she doesn't know what really goes on here. Because half the time she isn't even here. But
she's getting paid more than you, and not here half the time.
One benefit that did go into effect for all stores, union or not, is a bonus for all managers. Also, as far as what you were saying about getting a second job, sorry, this is very close. As far as getting a second job, they're hoping we're going to do that because the way that they've recently been union busting is waiting for people, cutting their hours, waiting for them to get a second job, so they have to limit their availability, and then saying that availability is no longer what this business needs, so you have to quit.
Even though they're not scheduling you enough.
Even though they're not scheduling you enough hours, they're hoping that you will need those hours to live, as workers do, and then they will fire you when your availability is no longer what it was because you had to get a second job.
And, it's also, I don't know about any of you, but workers I've spoke with, have kids, things like that. So if you're not getting stable scheduling, you don't know if you're going to be able to, afford your kids' daycare or whatever the cost may be, other expenses too. So it's not just stressful for the individual, but if you have kids or something like that.
Another thing I want to mention about the whole get another job thing is this is the whole job market. 3 years ago, I was just talking to Sarah about how I was offered an assistant manager position for a retail store that no longer exists. They offered the position for $13.75 with no guaranteed hours. So this is happening everywhere, and if I just jump to another job that is going to treat me just as poorly, I need to change it somewhere. We need to change it. That's why this union movement needs to keep going, because we're just going to keep on jumping around trying to find something better if we don't fix the problems.
Anybody who wants to jump on this, there's been research shown the very rare executives that actually pay their workers a nice wage. It's been shown that if you actually, in this case, give the proper scheduling, pay the workers a fair wage, benefits, productivity will go up, profits will go up. Can you kind of talk about, I agree they're trying to get rid of people who are unionizing, but they seem to want to, their mentality is, let's do more with less for more profits. But their profits really wouldn't go down if they just hired more people, staffed appropriately. Anyone that wants to
Kind of speak to that. So, fun fact, I did get my degree in management. I came to Starbucks after I completed my degree. My goal was to move up within the company because, again, they market themselves as a very progressive company that people want to work for. And I said, okay, I can get on board with that. I'll move my way up. It'll be great. Everything will be fantastic. And then, obviously, like everybody else, when I got here, I was dismayed at what I found. And I really do think that you're correct in saying, if they would just give people more benefits, if they would treat their workers better, accommodate them better, their profits would go up because people would want to be working here. They would come to work and they'd be happy to be here. They would know that they can rely on their job to provide for themselves, provide for their families, provide what they need. I'm 24 years old, I have my college degree, and I still live at home with my parents because I cannot afford an apartment in New Jersey on a single salary full time. I work full time and I can't afford to support myself. And it's ridiculous. Whereas, again, if Starbucks would just provide the benefits to the workers, I would come into work and I'd be in such a good mood. I could afford to live. I could afford to drive a car. I'll show you guys my car later. It's disgusting. And it would just create a better environment all around. And if they would hire more workers, they wouldn't have such insane turnover. It's a proven fact that your business saves more money when you're retaining workers, not constantly hiring, constantly training new workers. And rather than invest in their partners and invest in their employees, we're partners in name only. They just say, yeah, you're partners in our business, and then they don't provide partnership whatsoever. And I think it really kind of pulled the wool over the public's eyes for so long. And then once this happened, they were like, oh, wait a minute, what's going on at Starbucks? And that's really how we got here.
But also, 24, I mean, it's kind of hard to plan for the future. If there's other things you want to do, you know, move, start a family, whatever, if you can't really afford to get out of your parents' house.
It's honestly kind of sad at this point. I've been with my boyfriend for 6 years. We can't even get our own apartment together because we both work for Starbucks. Can't get married, can't start a family, can't buy a new car. We were trying to buy a house when like the housing market was so fantastic. We're like, wow, it's a perfect time to buy. We could not come up with the funds to do it. And because my hours get slashed and they're up and they're down, I couldn't even plan on having a stable income to be able to make a mortgage payment or to be able to make a rent payment. The thought of it is terrifying that someday I'll move out and then all of a sudden my manager can decide, actually, I only need you for 20 hours this week. There goes half my income and I can't make rent and I get evicted.
So what are your thoughts then when you see media, politicians telling you, hey, the job numbers were double what was expected and unemployment's at very, very low, 3 decades low. Biden's saying this is the best recovery. I mean, all you got to do is kind of go around the country. Maybe it's good for certain people, but at least for young people, I'd even say middle-aged people, it seems kind of like these are all surface level numbers.
I think to especially the educated American, everybody knows it's absolute bullshit. It's quite literally just talking points for politicians. Oh, the jobs are up. Unemployment rate is so low. But I feel like they're also not taking into account the amount of people who are underemployed, people who aren't reaching their full potential for employment because of jobs like Starbucks where they're scheduling them 20 hours a week when they could be working 40, things like that. And I think it's really ridiculous for them to say, oh, job numbers are up. We've created so many jobs. What about the people who are already in their jobs and can't afford to live? I think the focus should be there. And again, when the workers have the power, the whole economy goes up. The Industrial Revolution, post that, when workers started unionizing, that was really, I think, the height of labor in this country.
And I think it's important. I think it's important for customers to be paying attention to this. Mm-hmm. You and your boyfriend both work at Starbucks. So the thought, I think, among just your average suburban wine mom who goes to the Starbucks drive-through is, oh, this is a good company. I'm sure the workers are treated right. I mean, two people who are working at Starbucks can't afford. I mean, this is not New York City. This is not L.A. This is not Chicago. It's South Jersey. You can't afford an apartment off of 2 people working at Starbucks.
Yeah, I think the more that customers get educated about it and the more that they use the power in their voice and the power in their wallets, the more power it's going to have over Starbucks. They don't care about us very clearly, but they care when it hurts their money. So if the customers really take a stand with us, granted, not going on a boycott right off the bat, but when we call for these direct actions, join us on the picket line, come out to the strikes, I think it really shows that they stand with us as partners. We're the ones who are there for them every day versus just blindly following Starbucks. I think that's going to make a really big impact.
Pledge real quick. So for customers who do want to support us, we have a pledge. It's called the No Contract, No Coffee Pledge. You can use this QR code or go to the website tinyurl.com/SBW pledge, and you can sign up so that we can inform you when local actions are happening that you can go support your local Starbucks that's organizing.
Last question for you guys. Obviously, if you've been paying attention, I don't know how many of you were paying attention to the presidential elections. Obviously, the left has been a little deflated. Amazon workers, now Trader Joe's. We've seen strikes, John Deere, Nabisco, Frito-Lay, the coal miners in Alabama. What do you say to people, even if they don't work at Starbucks, about just kind of like workers taking action themselves? And what should people do in their communities? Because it doesn't need to just be Starbucks. There's tenants unions fighting back these rental rates. What do you say to people who might want to get involved? They don't know how.
I mean, we are looking to help every worker organize. So if people want to reach out to any of the local Starbucks organizers, they're always happy to help you organize your workplace. Obviously, there are other groups that can help also. But as far as us, we are also willing to help anyone who wants to organize their workplace. We're in solidarity with every other Starbucks and Trader Joe's and Medieval Times and the cannabis workers and every other workplace.
Really, all you have to do is just reach out to somebody. They're in a union, they're in a Starbucks. Come talk to us. We would love to talk to you. Again, the goal, like Sarah said, is to get every worker unionized. And I think the more that people talk about it, the less scared that they are. And the more they're aware of their rights, the easier it's going to become. And I think the more that we build up that solidarity, the easier it's going to be for everybody.
Well, every worker deserves a union. It's that simple. And I know that there's a fear around it, a fear of retaliation, but you're protected by your union. If you win that vote, you're protected. So it's just, like we said, reach out to one of us, reach out to any Starbucks. We love to talk about it. It's,
Just anything that they said, and everyone deserves the right to be respected and have access to what they need. That's all.
By the way, let's just be real. They're treated. Half of the coffee is cream anyway. Half of the coffee is, I look at I got a salted caramel something. It was, no offense. It was 30% was cream. So they're making plenty of money. They should treat these workers the right way. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Yeah. So I want to show just kind of some of the signs so you kind of get a feel for this. And there's more people over here. By the way, Starbucks workers have been on strike in Philadelphia. There was a strike recently. There was strikes in Boston. There's been a lot of strikes. So you see what the frap, Starbucks. The union strikes back. This looks kind of like a Jenga or something like that. Oh, unfair labor practice, Jenga. So closing early to cut hours, denial of benefits, gatekeeping office supplies, wow. Taking away training opportunities, gaslighting, and bad managers at the bottom. So that is, we got side too, microaggression, one-on-ones, Lyra. What's Lyra?
Lyra is Starbucks' like mental health counseling or whatever. And they'll give you like 20 free sessions a year, and it's all it is just coaching on your mental health. So as someone with mental health issues, my manager continued to like shove these papers in my face, and I was like, I don't need coaching. I need like actual like mental health help. Yeah. And it was just an ongoing argument between me and my manager. I'm like, I don't want this. And she's like, you need this. Starbucks is going to take care of you. And I'm like, no, they won't. They clearly won't. They've already made that very clear. So, yeah. And then there's also racial microaggressions, firing organizers, racism, and hiding, because our manager likes to hide from us and not.
Tell me about that, because during George Floyd, a lot of these Black Lives Matter movements, I kept seeing BLM in the window, and Starbucks, at least optically, was pretty, woke. Yeah. But you're saying that there's some issues.
Well, we were having one of our coworkers has used racial slurs, and that's really not okay to us. And we brought that to our manager, and I was like, hey, this is really not okay. This makes me very uncomfortable. And she was like, well, you need to assume the best in people. And I looked at her and I said, that does not apply to racial slurs. I can see assuming the best in people if they're having a bad day or something. But if someone calls another person a slur, I do not have to assume anything. Like, it's disgusting. And then also, my manager likes to say, I said, the other day, like, there's, like when you say like period to a sentence, like, or like someone else doing something, she looked at me and she said, "What's that from?" And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, "That comes from like a certain group of people." And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And she was like, "Just like a certain group of people." And I'm like, well, it's a word. It's like, I'm sorry, it's like like, I don't know what you want me to say. So I think it's very clear what she was saying about that. Yeah. She clearly does not understand a lot. And then also, here's another funny one. Starbucks likes to put in their training that it's necessary to have sharps containers because, you know, we deal with broken glass, we deal with stuff like that. And also, employees have found needles in our trash cans. Yeah, which is very unsafe for us. But our manager said, well, you know what? Sharps containers are necessary in more urban areas. And I looked at her, I was like, what do you mean by that? What do you mean urban? I'm like, my cousin who dealt with drug abuse lived right down the road. We're in Hopewell, New Jersey. It doesn't matter. Drug abuse is everywhere. And also broken glass is everywhere. Sharps containers are for sharp objects that could hurt us. It's our safety. It's not just for needles, but also it's everywhere. It's like, I don't understand what she thinks she's trying to say here. It's like, she's so sheltered and like whatever. I don't even know. I'm so frustrated with it.
So, fun little story. A couple of months ago, my cousin was murdered. I found out late at night. I had to open the next morning. And, you know, going through grief, at one point you kind of just have to work. You're trying to work through it and just trying to function. So I was like, I have to go to work because if I sit here by myself all day, I'm just going to be a mess. So I come to work. I didn't get any sleep naturally, but we had a little fun phenomenon that day where just no one got sleep for just various reasons. Like my supervisor, she just couldn't get comfortable that night. And so I was like making an offhand joke about like, oh, none of us are running on any sleep tonight. And so our manager comes up and was like, oh, yeah, I couldn't get any sleep last night. I was writing a paper. What's your excuse? And we have this thing called the third place, which is basically this is the place where people can feel safe and welcomed and loved and supported, even though the workers don't feel that way. We have to maintain that for employees and management. So I just went, I don't know, Misty, trauma. I was not going to say, oh, my cousin got murdered on the middle of working. And she rolls her eyes and then says in front of my supervisor, well, you need to take accountability for your trauma, and then goes off the floor. Me being upset and clearly distressed, even though I wasn't getting into it, she was annoyed by it. It was a nuisance for her. And this is just how she treats our problems. The only person who ever has problems in the store is her, and if we have any problems, they're not legitimate. Yep. And something similar happened to her as well.
I've had 3 deaths in my family this year, and earlier, or last year technically, in September, there was that big storm that hit around here, and, you know, a lot of houses flooded, you know, there's like tornadoes and stuff, and that was around the time my cousin died. And so I came in and I was like, oh yeah, like clearly upset. And, you know, in Starbucks, you have to keep this like happy face, you know, none of your problems matter. Starbucks just wants you to be that nice person for everyone, which I would love to be. But if there's something actually going on, don't give me shit for not being on my, like, not feeling my best, you know? But then I come in, my manager clearly notices because, you know, I have a little bit of a frown on my face, God forbid. And I explained it to her, and she goes, well, if it makes you feel any better, I'm actually homeless right now. She wasn't homeless. That's such an insensitive thing to say, number one. Number two, her house flooded. Her kitchen flooded. She wasn't homeless. She had an RV. Starbucks was paying for her to stay in a hotel. But, you know, that wasn't good enough. So then she, you know, hopped around, you know, stayed with some family, bought an RV, went to the hotels. Like, come on. Could afford an RV. And you are telling me, oh, you're homeless? You know, you shouldn't feel bad. You know, your cousin's dead, whatever. I'm homeless. Feel bad for me. That's disgusting. And for her to keep doing these things like, oh, you know what, defending racist statements, saying racist things, it's just, I'm so fed up. And it's unbelievable at this point because it keeps continuing happening. And I go to my district manager, I tell him, and he's like, no, he doesn't care. He justifies it. He's like, oh yeah, she's just trying to relate to you. Oh, she didn't mean it that way. You need to assume the best in people. It's so disgusting. Go ahead.
We can't even call them microaggressions anymore. Management has just been saying racist, awful things. And some things that are just flat out insensitive to just any community. And it's so enraging. And that's not what we're here on strike for, but it was definitely something that riled up so much anger in all of us to say that we need to take some type of direct action. There needs to be a final straw. We can't let this keep happening.
Do you get a feeling these managers are trained a certain way by corporate or whomever trains them to communicate or treat the actual line workers a certain way?
We know for a fact it exists. We've seen that there are training modules and that there have been like packets and leaflets left in the back office of how to talk to workers. Baristas across the country were very in touch with each other, and they've let us know like, hey, our manager just got told this over in Arizona or something.
And then a week later we get that in our store, and it just like certain flyers, anti-union flyers. Yeah, it's insane. It really is. But go ahead, what were you saying?
That was it.
That was it, yeah.
Because it seems to be based on not just Starbucks but Amazon. The managers all act kind of a certain way. You were talking about they both kind of said this, give people the benefit of the doubt, kind of. So it kind of comes off a little like trained robots to treat workers a certain way.
Oh, yeah. And you can really tell when you're talking to them because they will show you a certain amount of emotion that's planned, but then also not say too much. And it's really not personal. Like, not like, it's not that you don't take it personal, it's that like you're not having that connection with people. So like you don't feel like you actually know your district manager. You just feel like you know the robot version of him that Starbucks created. And there's really no help there. Like we're not heard. Because he doesn't want to hear us. It goes one ear and out the other. And then he's like, don't worry, we'll give you new ovens, you know? Because the bottom of our ovens have been falling off and hitting our feet and literally hurting us. And it's insane. It really is. It's like, if people knew what was really going on in here, and customers do know. Some of our regulars, I will straight up tell them. I'm like, guess what happened today? And they're like, that's crazy. Like, we know what you're going through. Like, we could see what you're going through. Like, I am so sorry. And those are our biggest supporters because they come in every day, they get their coffee, and then they have a conversation with us and ask us how it's going. But, yeah.
Sorry you're dealing with this. So, honk for unions. Let me show some of the folks over here. So, there's also some non-Starbucks workers that are kind of allies. Hey, come on over. So they're kind of standing over in solidarity. Support your baristas. Honk if you support Joe from our revolution. So yeah, I was just talking to workers. Seems like this is not. Let's say this is not isolated to just this Starbucks.
Absolutely not.
Talk about kind of what our revolution has been doing, and kind of some of the trends you've been seeing.
Yeah, definitely. So it most certainly is not isolated to this location, to even the New Jersey Starbucks. I would even say there's more of a preponderance outside of New Jersey for this type of stuff. But if there's a location in New Jersey that's seeing similar experiences to all of the union busting tactics that have been going on around the country, because are there over 300 NLRB violations? Yeah. Something like that. It's absurd. But it's absurd, but it's also typical of this type of stuff. This is the location that sees the most of that because they were the first to file. They voted unanimously to unionize. Yeah. And they're among the more active and outspoken of the Starbucks locations. So, I've kind of heard rumblings that they may be trying to either make them an example, or this may be a petty like pushback type of thing where, you guys voted, 25-0. you're the real pains in the asses, so we're going to go after you guys. So that's why, they don't come to the table and negotiate. They try all these different union busting tactics, cutting benefits, cutting hours, cutting that type of stuff. So, I mean, first things first, we're just here to support them because this is about the workers first and foremost, period, stop. We do a lot of other work beyond that. We tend to be a little more electorally oriented, but we always try to come out and support labor organizing. We always try to come out and support everyone across the spectrum who's in the progressive movement. Try to support DSA when we can. Try to support all the Starbucks locations. I live down in Hamilton, which is probably about 10 minutes south here, 15 minutes south here, 15. And there's another Starbucks location there. We try to turn out and support them. They've had a bunch of community days here over the course of trying to win their union election. And a bunch of the local unions turned out. We got a few local elections to turn out for that. We've got one here turning out for this, one of the state assemblymen. So honestly, we're just really excited to see the level of community support that has been here. And I was just having a conversation about those 300 NLRB violations, right? The community liaison here made the point, like, the NLRB doesn't have a whole lot of mechanisms that they can use right now to hold corporations and employers accountable. That's why we need something like the PRO Act, which is something that our Revolution National, straight on down to all the county chapters. I co-chair our Mercer County chapter. We're in Mercer County. We're on that. National did a whole PRO Act tour. They toured like large portions of the country for weeks, doing rallies in different locations. They did a big rally up in Buffalo, I believe. Don't quote me on this, but I believe it was with the first location to unionize, the first Starbucks location up in Buffalo. That is a crucial element to this, and it kind of shows how all of this fits together, because you need labor organizing, we need union power, we need to build the movement to get more workplaces unionized, and then bring those unions together with the movement to push for good things for regular working people. But we also need to make the rules to do that and to then leverage that easier. So we have to push on the electoral side and on the legislative side at the same time to try to open things up and make it easier for us to increase unionization rates and then have those unions be willing to be more active and build with the movement and more militant. Because I can tell you, New Jersey is a very union state, but there are a lot of unions that politically tend to skew more towards the center or even on the conservative side of things, and that can be a problem. Because then you end up with folks who support the unions but don't support the legislation necessary to create more unions, to create more justice for workers.
There's a lot of unions where the heads are not doing what the rank and file want. A lot of unions where the heads are not simpatico or give a shit really what the rank and file. Let me ask you about the electoral. Obviously we know, the Democrats are, celebrating this new, whatever they're calling it, the Inflation Reduction Act, which in my view is a Band-Aid to a really, really big gunshot wound. Even the climate portion, it's all tax incentives. They're throwing money for fossil fuels within it, but then saying, we got to take something. But stuff's been going on the local level. You've been mentioning kind of the local work our revolution is doing. New Jersey's a Democratic state, but it's your typical kind of establishment, status quo Democratic state. Murphy's done some good things, but this is not like a progressive bastion. What has been going on locally in terms of trying to embolden and strengthen protections for workers here?
So in terms of emboldening and strengthening protections for workers, New Jersey does have relatively good protections for unions. Governor Murphy, I actually think on the grand scheme of things, compared to the governors in all the other 49 states, is pretty damn good. But that's not me saying he's the best thing since sliced bread. That's me pointing out, wow, these other 49 governors really suck. Because he does do a few good progressive things, so I'll give him credit for that. But then he'll turn around and support a lot of problematic Democratic candidates. We have a very unique ballot structure here in New Jersey that basically rigs our primary elections, where you have one column that shows up all the way on the left, has a big name at the top, and if you get an endorsement from your local county party, you end up in that column. You get about a third more of the vote on average in a primary. They did a study of 4 different congressional races in the 2020 primary, and that was the average number they came up with.
Because your name appears higher, or
So it's like a spreadsheet, right? You have all these columns, and the race you're running for is on the left, and then the candidate appears next to that. And there's one column that's immediately to the left of that they'll usually, sometimes it's one or two over. There's a whole ballot draw process that I don't want to get too far in the weeds on. But that column will usually have a Joe Biden or a Phil Murphy or Cory Booker at the top. And that lends legitimacy down ballot. It's a full column, so it looks more legitimate. And then you look out off to the side, and there's like scattered candidates all over the place. So everybody who goes into the ballot box on primary day who doesn't know about this or isn't specifically looking to vote against that line is going to vote for it. So you end up with an automatic 33% advantage, 35% advantage right off the bat if you're on that line. And that decides elections by itself. And, you know, Governor Murphy hasn't really done anything about that, hasn't really done anything about he's actually come out and supported a lot of candidates on those lines because he's the Democrat at the top of the ticket, so he feels like he has to, but it still reinforces that problem. And this becomes a big problem because New Jersey's political parties use this structure as a foundation to kind of maintain control of the electoral system, maintain control of who can get into power. And it's why you end up with a legislature that's disproportionately white, disproportionately male, and tend to not support the interests of marginalized groups, of the working class, that type of thing, compared to what you would expect from a state that is 60% Democrat like New Jersey, that does have a progressive bent among its electorate, but not among its electeds. Because
you mean Cory Booker's not fighting for the working Joe and Jane?
Booker, problematic, but not anywhere near to the degree of Menendez. I go after Menendez a lot more easily because he's got like obvious bigger problems, including corruption. If you want to go back to the Inflation Reduction Act you were talking about, he was a big barrier to trying to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices, which I believe is still in that package, which is a big deal. We did a lot of work back when Build Back Better was still a thing. I drove up to North Jersey like 6 times for rallies to try to make sure that Josh Gottheimer, who's one of the most conservative members of the House, real problem, didn't tank it in the House before we even got to the Senate, right? And that was one of the big measures we were fighting for, so I'm happy to see that in this legislation. To your point on that,
Just to give you the fine print, this whole lowering drug prices, A, we don't know which drugs it is. B, it starts in 2026. So there will be 15 drugs in 2026, another 20 added in 2027, and so on. So they're staggering it starting in a couple years from now. I'd like to see which drugs they're talking about lowering, so it might not be all bad. But the parliamentarian just ruled against them capping the cost of insulin. So again, an unelected bureaucrat who's not even she's not like a law official. She's just an advisor. She's an excuse. That's why they're not going to cap the price of insulin. So it just so happens Chuck Schumer is the number 2 recipient of big pharma money. Anyway,
you pointed out all the problems with it really, really well. I am glad there's something in there for it, but man, that is, I didn't know that the parliamentarian ruled against it, and shouldn't mean anything. It does because they're going to use it as an excuse. And there are multiple layers to why they need a reconciliation bill passed. One of them is that if they don't pass something to re-up the ACA subsidies, they're going to see a major spike in people's premiums and deductibles and stuff right before the election. So electorally, that is a terrible thing to happen if you want Democrats to actually be able to win their elections. So that's one of the big incentives for them to do a reconciliation package. That's why I think some of the more progressive reps are kind of like coming to the table a little bit more than they were back for Build Back Better, when you saw the Progressive Caucus for a while kind of hold together and hold the line until they didn't, because Biden promised them they'd get it done. He'd get it done, and then he didn't. But it's really problematic to see all the things you talked about. It's really problematic to see the climate portions of the bill where there's a requirement for every solar installation, every wind installation, you have to lease X amount of federal land for drilling, for oil drilling. That's not addressing the climate crisis. That's requiring you to not be able to do enough for the climate crisis. And that's my big problem with the Inflation Reduction Act. You can call it whatever you want, right? Like, if that was the requirement to get Manchin on board with Build Back Better, we should have changed the name in October, but that obviously was not the only issue. it just goes to my frustrations where you haven't seen enough of a consistent PR campaign, enough of a consistent pressure campaign from Democratic leadership to get the more conservative elements of the caucus on board, to get your Mentions and your Sinemas and your Gottheimers on board. Really,
Democratic leadership doesn't want most of the things you want. They could say they do, but Schumer, Pelosi, I look at it as kind of it's a wink and a nod thing to donors. Like, we got to do something, but we're not really going to hit you as hard as we can.
They're trying to walk a line. They're walking the line far too close to the conservative and the corporate end of the spectrum, in my opinion. Someone like Schumer, back during the whole Build Back Better process, actually was saying a lot of really good things and seemed to be on board with a lot of what was in there. I mean, hell, this was Biden's legislative package. That was the whole point. But since then, I think they've kind of reset to their default, which is think like 80s, 90s Democratic politicians. You need to tack to the middle. You need to triangulate onto that swing voter, which politics doesn't work like that now. So they're trying to walk this line because the incentives within the Democratic Party, you've got the money, which wants one thing, and the groups that are buying into that, whether it's through propaganda or they actually have interests in being bought into that. And then you've got regular folks and progressives who want to see good things for regular people and us to actually focus our money and our resources as a country on making everyday people's lives better and spending money to do that. And when you have those two divergent forces, right now, we're in the process of trying to organize the people to be able to have enough power to fight that battle, to pull the Democratic Party to doing things like passing the PRO Act, to honestly repealing the filibuster. Before you can do any of this crap, unless you're talking about a reconciliation bill, you got to repeal the filibuster. That's the core of what we're trying to do.
What do you say to people that say you're a schmuck, you're running a fool's errand, our revolution, We've seen what happens when you try to elect progressives in the Democratic Party. I've had my criticisms of the squad. I think they folded like a cheap tent on a lot of things. I don't think they've been really activating their base like they said they would. And they say, it doesn't matter how many progressives you elect to the Democratic Party. It doesn't matter how much outside organizing. You can't change a corrupt party. We should do it outside the Democratic Party.
So what I would say to that is organizing regular people, organizing progressives, organizing leftists within the Democratic Party is no harder than organizing an active, legitimate, threatening third party. I would say it's honestly a little bit easier because the way that things are set up with our electoral system makes it nigh impossible to start up a third party that can build significant support, get itself on the ballot in a way where it's a real threat. Without some folks on the inside fixing the systemic things that are blocking those third parties. I would love to see a viable progressive third party. That would be fantastic because it would be a factor to really speak up for working people where you don't have all these institutional barriers that you see within the Democratic Party, which is what we're working to try to go after. I mean, we do work on the outside as well. We do direct actions. We don't just go and do electoral work within the Democratic Party. I know there's OR chapters elsewhere who've supported, when it's made sense, you support independents, you support third-party candidates. Bernie's an independent himself. But the strategic elements of trying to get, independent and third-party candidates in who can work at the local level, anything above that's very, very difficult because you need X number of signatures to even be on the ballot, and those numbers are insanely high in New Jersey. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but they've structured the electoral system in such a way to block third parties as effectively, if not more effectively, than trying to organize progressives and working class people in the Democratic Party. And what I've found within the Democratic Party, it's not some mastermind scheme. These are not folks who have set everything up to be completely rigged and there's no way to get in and it's just the steel wall in front of you. There's cracks all over the place, man. I've managed to myself run for a super duper local position in my town, in my county in New Jersey. It's called Democratic County Committee or Democratic Municipal Committee. And you end up being one of the people who votes on those endorsements I mentioned that put people in those spots on the ballot where they're going to win in a primary. So you can organize locally, you can build groups outside of the Democratic Party and bring them inside to support, more progressive interests. You can build it within the Democratic Party and garner support because there are a lot of people within the Democratic Party who want to see good things done. They're progressive in their political opinions and their wants. They just don't think it's possible. And one thing you can do is by organizing successfully. We got 20 people across our county who have not been on Democratic committee before. into these positions so that we can try to weigh in and have more of a platform to speak up for progressive issues. We're weighing in on things like trying to get one of our representatives, my representative Andy Kim, we want to get him on and co-sponsoring Medicare for All. I don't see a good reason why he shouldn't be, but the fact that we have this presence on county committee matters. It means we get FaceTime with him. It means we can, sign letters, and it has an added oomph. Because this is you're a party official. You're the ground floor of the party. The people who are supposed to go out and turn out the vote for Democratic candidates. It's doable.
I think locally, you make a good point, because it's not the sexy topic, and
We've never tried ground up like this. We've tried ground up building support for somebody like Bernie, and thank goodness Bernie happened when he did. I wouldn't be here if not for that. We haven't tried the ground up approach where you actually get in to the party at the ground level. There are people trying it around the country now. They have been for a while. But we need more of a groundswell of support, because you're not going to be able to tackle something like the DNC or even your state Democratic Party committee unless you get enough people in at the very ground level in your towns and your counties, right?
I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I agree with you on the local level, but there's so many people not getting involved in the local level because they're disappointed with AOC. I mean, frankly, I don't, whatever. I don't get into names, but I think that the problem isn't, to me, I don't really care. Dem enter, dem exit, do what you want. What I think is the problem is, if you run, because we could get people on these positions, but if you then get elected, whether it's county commission or a congressperson, and you essentially are neutered. For example, it's great that AOC protested Roe. Where was the grassroots activism to be out there at the worst of the pandemic, activating the base to protest outside the White House for Medicare for All? So that's the problem. It's that if you're running, if you're inspiring people to knock on doors for you, make calls for you, donate money for you, and then you're doing magazine covers and you're not organizing and you're not calling out. I mean, she did an interview. She kind of sort of didn't answer if she would vote for Biden, but that kind of rallying the troops, being aggressive in opposition, it doesn't mean you don't compromise ever, but we don't really have that right now from the electeds nationally, which is I'm sure you see it, has deflated a whole lot of progressives.
What's been more deflating is, it's a combination of things, right? I don't know how much of an impact someone like AOC not being as militantly advocating as she had been in the past. I don't know how much of an impact that necessarily has, but when you see consistently the forces that come to play against progressives, both inside and outside of the political system, that can be deflating. It can be very deflating when you see that people turned out in 2020. People voted. Like, my goodness, look at the turnout numbers. Look at the turnout numbers for young people who voted in the 2020 election. And then we still end up in the crap situation we're in, and the only messaging that comes out from the Democratic Party is vote. Just vote harder. We voted pretty damn hard. What happened? And there needs to be an acknowledgement
with the thing now of saying just give us 2 more senators so we make Manchin and Sinema obsolete. I don't know if you remember back. 8 senators voted against Bernie's amendment for a $15 minimum wage. It wasn't just Manchin and Sinema. So call me a cynical Susie. Just getting 2 more senators doesn't guarantee. I mean, a $15 minimum wage at this point is a joke. That's for in inflationary times, not even $15.
That should be the floor for anything you're fighting for. It should be a $15 minimum wage. You need to get upwards of 20 if you're actually going to properly account for inflation. To your point, you go back to when Obama was in office and they were trying to pass the ACA. You had, 59, 60 senators? And they couldn't get a public option done, let alone Medicare for All. And, putting the policy problems with the public option aside, that's a perfect example of you get more Democratic senators and you still have these problems. It's not just about getting more, it's about getting good quality senators where the incentives within the political system are aligned to hold them accountable. And that's why you need to organize locally. This is about changing the incentives with the system. It's not about saying that, AOC's not as militant as she needs to be. That's a problem. It's AOC in the grand scheme of things is not keeping us from passing these things. I'd love to see her being more active. But what's keeping us from passing these things is that the incentive in the electoral system is all behind money. It's all behind institutional political power at this point. So even when you get progressives in, they've found a crack. They've tweaked their way in. And then when you get there, I can speak from my own experience here, you need to learn how to lie low a lot of times and understand how to build power, because if you're as militant as she had been, if you're as active, you draw a lot of attention. She's still drawing attention, so maybe the argument doesn't hold for her. But I know you don't want to pick a fight until you have the power to make positive gains from that fight. And I am not in her position. I'm not in, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Cori Bush, any of the squad or any of the progressives, Jamal Bowman. I'm not in any of their shoes. I don't know the specifics of what pressures they do and don't face, but you want to basically get in there and kind of hold your ground and then pull people in after you. So that's why you see, there's been a lot of problems with some of the places AOC has sent her money. That's why you see her and others building support and resources to get more progressives in. Could they do a better job of that? Likely. I'm not trying to hold them up as a shining star. I'm trying to share and give a little bit of context from someone who at the local level is doing a little bit of what I'd like to see them do. And that is you get in, you organize a group, you organize community, you organize a collective group because you need numbers to realign those incentives. And if you're drawing too much attention and too much ire, it's hard to do that and to build support. Now, at the local level, one of the big differences is you can convince people in a way that when you're in DC, I have to assume it's difficult to convince people whose pocketbooks are being lined to make sure that they won't be convinced.
I think really what it comes down to, there is a difference between local and national, but at the end of the day, I do actually think AOC, the squad, even Bernie to a degree, have more of an impact than you think on the local level, because I covered Nina Turner's election, 2 elections. She didn't run perfect campaigns, she made some mistakes, but both times I was really not surprised, but it was very obvious there wasn't as many volunteers as I thought there would be. Bernie in Iowa in 2020, people came from around the world to knock on doors, all over the country. There was not as many.
Bernie's Bernie.
Right,
It's like, we
but
need more of those.
right. But my point is, there wasn't as many volunteers, enthusiasm, those kind of things.
I got to grab him real quick. I'll pop back a little
Go
bit.
ahead. So, yeah, so they're dancing over there. You see other folks with signs. Hopewell Starbucks on strike. And, we should point out that I think it's I don't have the exact number, I think 250 or so Starbucks have unionized, and a whole lot more have filed. And this is not just in New Jersey and New York. You're talking in the South, in Texas. I think there was something I saw in Georgia. These are not union havens. And why it's important, if you know your history, you know that income inequality chart, how the red line started shooting up? That started in the late 70s, early 80s. What happened in the late 70s, early 80s? Between starting to send our jobs offshore, but Reagan took a goddamn axe to unions. And the Democrats, by the way, helped him. The Democrats were complicit in that because they saw Reagan's popularity and said, oh, we need to move to the right. Thank you, Bill Clinton, Al Gore, and the rest of those fucking Neanderthals, in addition to putting the whole generation of black men in prison for no reason. But the point is, the last time in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, sure, you could say, well, there was also the war economy and all that. There were strong unions. That was the last time you had any semblance of economic equality. Black people were not necessarily a part of that, but the point is there was some semblance of a middle class. You could kind of take a vacation. You could maybe get away with one parent working. It wasn't this greed is good, Gordon Gekko, social Darwinism, survival of the fittest. So that's why it's important. These are not the sexy stories. This doesn't go viral hey, they're taking a photo. This doesn't go viral a hot take on Joe Rogan. It's way more important. It's way more important. Even coming out on a Sunday morning in the heat, it's hot out. It's way more important to cover this. I don't agree with everything that guy was saying. I think it does make a big difference when you have progressives in Congress that are not fighting. I don't really give a shit. AOC is the one that said, I'll serve one term. I'd rather serve one term and do it right. It does matter because those progressives, their core job, I don't think anyone expects them to be perfect. I don't think anyone expects the squad to snap their fingers and get us health care. You expect them to send out the bat signal. You expect them to send out the bat signal to activate everyone else. because pressure does matter. If the squad during the pandemic was out there in front of the White House with megaphones telling Biden, you need to expand Medicare now. This, unemployment and a $1,200 check, and we'll cover some of your COVID care. No. We're in a global pandemic. This is what the rest of the civilized world is doing. You need to do it now. You would have activated a whole lot of people right now. I'm sure some of them are in the chat now that are deflated and don't want to listen to them anymore because they're doing more inside baseball. And Morning Joe, AOC seems more comfortable on magazine covers and on Morning Joe than she does, rabble-rousing against Joe Biden. Hell, Bernie right now, I appreciate everything Bernie's doing. He's offering amendments to this shit sandwich known as the Inflation Reduction Act. Is he going to block it? Of course not. So he's talking about the imperfections, but he's not willing to wield his power. Bernie has the same vote that Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema have. He's got the same power to block things as they do. He's not willing to use it. And I know Bernie knows this. The media could say whatever they want. When your house is on fire, tax incentives aren't going to put it out. When the planet's on fire, neoliberal tax incentives, neoliberal grants are not going to stave off planetary destruction. That's what this historic climate paction is. People get very triggered when you use the term mandates, right? Mandates in COVID. People don't want to hear it. Well, we need some fucking mandates. We need to force corporations to stop using fossil fuels. This is not a theoretical debate. You need to force corporate America, not incentivize them. You need to force them to immediately start shifting, not a little bit, a lot of bit, in terms of wind, solar, renewable, electric. But we're not going to do that because we live in a capitalist hellscape. And you just heard from these workers, this is Starbucks. When people hear Starbucks, they don't think like, oh, workers are struggling to pay rent in New Jersey, or ovens are falling on their feet, or 20-somethings are, at home with their parents. This is the great economy that they're putting out there right now. If you watched on Friday when the job numbers came out, these CNN anchors were like gleeful. It was pathetic. So this is what's really going on. That's why we go out there on the ground. That's why we show up weekends, late nights. We just did our reporting tour around the country. We need your support. So if you're new to this, support us, statuscoup.com/join. You could join us for $5 to $10 a month. As humbly as I could say it, I was on the ground in Buffalo before the first Starbucks unionized. I was covering it before they won. I was covering the Amazon workers in Staten Island for a year before they won. When all these Johnny-come-latelys came, oh, history, this and that. They weren't out there in the heat. I was. They weren't out there when it was thunderstorming. I was. By the way, this was the black lead. Status Coup was, excuse me. This was a black lead workers organizing in Staten Island. Some of these channels that supposedly care about black issues, they weren't covering it. So my point is, if you got a couple bucks, $5 a month, statuscoup.com/join. We gained 70 new members since my reporting trip through Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. I'd like to get to 100. So if it's not within your means, I understand. If it is, $5 a month is 16 cents a day. I'm pretty sure if you're buying Starbucks 3 times a week, that's probably $15 to $20, depending on if you're getting one of those small ones or like a venti frappafucca. So please, please, please support us, statuscoup.com/join. You become a member for $5 to $10 a month. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter. We're also on TikTok now with the cool kids. So we're going to cut up some of this for TikTok. And subscribe if you're new here. Before I go, let me read some of the comments. Whew. Honk, honk, honk. Critiquing them may motivate them a tad. That's what Jordan does. Jordan, this old boomer lady loves you. Love you too. Starbucks, unless it's an emergency, is supporting the top 0.008%. And I think that's important, what you're bringing up. People want to do hashtags, right? Fraud squad, this and that. I'm a reporter. I'm not like a 12-year-old. So I'm not going to say fraud squad. But I think we have to learn our lesson from Bernie. You can't have heroes. You could admire politicians. I'm not going to throw Bernie out, just because he's disappointing me now. A lot of people here would not be here unless for Bernie's movement. A lot of people who have big YouTube channels would not be here unless Bernie's movement. Bernie's done a lot for the progressive movement. That doesn't mean he has a lifetime pass against criticism. Bernie, a year ago, should have been blocking legislation. He supported Biden. He folded like a cheap tent, endorsed him. He didn't even get a $15 minimum wage out of it because my friend Joe. Well, Bernie, if these are your friends, maybe you need to go to a therapist because he's not doing what he should be doing to, and you should have, by the way, when you endorsed him, had some non-negotiables, which was your first plan of action is a $15 minimum wage, and I want your word you're going to go for it. Now, if Bernie wants to come out and say, I did demand that, and he did say he was going to give me that, he could do that, but he hasn't. But the most important thing is everybody wants to focus on the top line thing, AOC, Bernie, the squad. We need to focus on this stuff. They're out there by the streets getting honked. This is not the sexy stuff. This is not the stuff that will go viral on YouTube, Twitter. This is not the stuff that most other channels cover. But this is the important stuff because this is what actually gets changed for workers on the ground level. These workers who are out here striking, because they're unionized now, it is harder for Starbucks to fire them. And when Starbucks fires them, they now have a union to go to the National Labor Relations Board and contest it. A lot of the workers that Starbucks has fired for union organizing have now gotten their jobs back because they're part of a union. When I went out to cover the John Deere strikes in Iowa in October, they were part of a union. All these companies that are successfully striking, they're part of a union. So it's very, very important. Yes, we should focus on the top line issues, progressives nationally, Dem enter, Dem exit, third party, all those things are important. But there are things happening on the ground, and it's not just Starbucks workers, Amazon workers, Trader Joe's workers are now unionizing. They successfully got their first union. You see on the lower level, Verizon workers have started a unionization campaign. Apple workers have started a unionization campaign. So things are happening. It's not all doom and gloom. It's not all, oh, fuck, we have either Biden or whatever batshit Republican they're pushing. So very, very important. You don't have to work at Starbucks to get involved. As those workers said, you could reach out to Starbucks Workers United. They might have organizing resources for you outside of Starbucks. So definitely get involved. Support the workers out here. Support independent media. I truly wish more independent media outlets were doing what we're doing. It doesn't even need to be on the ground, but just having these workers on their show, promoting it, getting the word out that workers are on strike, workers are unionizing. A record number of workers are quitting and interviewing those workers. It's important to get people's stories out. I'm wrapping, so.
Donate to strike funds too. Donate to strike funds. Throw your money at this type of stuff. It's really, really impactful. If you look up Hopewell Starbucks United on Twitter, any of the social media platforms, specifically Twitter, although I know they have the link up there. There's a strike fund you can donate to for these folks. There is a pledge you can sign, the No Coffee, No Contract pledge, basically saying you're not going to go to Starbucks, you're not going to go get coffee at any unionized location where they're not coming to the table and negotiating a contract. They don't have a contract, right? There's a link up there. If you go to our social media, our Revolution New Jersey or our Revolution Trenton Mercer, it's at RevNJ. We've got that stuff up there if you scroll down a little bit. It might be at the top now, I don't know. But yeah, you can find that on there. There's a bunch of resources you can always look into to try to find folks who are organizing locally like you were talking about. Whatever part of the movement you want to be a part of. And that's one of the things I always try to highlight. We may be a little more skewed towards electoralism, direct action, actually supporting campaigns, getting our people into office and positions of power where they can do good. But there's so many other elements to the movement. There is labor organizing. There is, building mutual aid funds. Just, donating to all of these different causes. There's abortion funds now because that's insanely important because we're starting to see basic civil rights get rolled back. So just find a place to chip in. And I don't think I need to tell this to this crowd on here, but I try to tell this to as many people as I can. You're going to hear people yell at you to vote. You're going to hear Democrats yell at you to vote specifically. Doesn't mean you shouldn't go do it. Voting is harm reduction. That's what it is. It helps by making the descent into fascism slower or halt it temporarily. Don't think that it is wasted. It can be helpful, but it is not enough by itself. We can't turn it around just by voting. You have to organize, you have to put your money towards good causes, you have to get involved, donate your time as best you can, get involved, understand what's going on, and build communities that collectively can push for change. Voting helps, triage the situation a little bit because you get people who are less harmful in. But if we want to get people who are actually going to go build the transformative society, the transformative movement to change our society into something more equitable and just and people-focused, worker-focused, we need to build power ourselves because there's nobody else coming to save us.
I want to make one more point, and this might be a little triggering, so I'm not referring to the baby boomers in my audience, because you baby boomers in my audience are pretty damn progressive and with it. But I would say to you, if you're a young person in our audience, if you're a progressive baby boomer in our audience, it's very important. Send these interviews to older people in your life who keep voting for these corporatist scumbag Democrats and Republicans. Send parts of these interviews where 24-year-olds are saying, I'm living with my parents because I can't get enough hours. Or 20-somethings are saying, oh yeah, this strong job market, I sent in 55 job applications and I didn't get a call back from any of them. They don't want to hire anyone. Send the parts of these interviews where 20-somethings, which are their kids' age or their grandkids' age. I'm talking about the voters that keep voting for the Bidens and the Clintons and the Obamas and the Cory Bookers and these establishment Democrats. Send it to them and make sure they're seeing that, the people you're voting for are basically stealing a whole generation's future because they're screwing them. And they're letting these corporations run roughshod over people. And because they take money, Starbucks donates, Amazon donates, corporations could do whatever they want. Hence, United Corporations of America, get this fire shirt, statuscoup.com/store. Just saying, United Corporations of America. So make sure it's not just your Republican uncle who needs to see it. It's your neoliberal auntie, okay? It's your academic in your family that keeps voting for these status quo Democrats. Because frankly, not to my audience, the baby boomer generation is who keeps voting. They are the most reliable voters. They are the strongest voters. They vote the most, and they vote in general. And this goes across, it's not just old white people, older black voters too. They vote for the Nancy Pelosi's, the James Clyburns, the Cory Bookers, the Bidens, the Pete Buttigieg's. They need to see, oh no, it's not just laziness. There are no good jobs. And this is a capitalist hellscape we're living in. And if you then hear from them, well, in my day, oh yeah, well, in your day, college wasn't $60,000 a year. You can go to college. I think Elizabeth Warren said her tuition was like $500 a semester. Okay, in your day, you actually you actually had unions or stronger unions. In your day, rent wasn't $5,000 in a major American city. So I don't want to hear any more about your fucking day. Okay, to the baby boomers. Anyway, I digress. Thank you for watching. Again, if you have $5 to $10 a month, join us, statuscoup.com/join. It makes a big difference. Thanks to Ty behind the camera, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.